Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. I'm Molly Starback from the Office of Postdoctoral Services, and today we are very happy to welcome our friends from Affinergy. Lindsay Marjoram, one of my old buddies, former postdoc, who is the Director of Technology Development. Martin Darby, who is the Director of Research. Aaron Carlson, also a former Duke postdoc, who is a scientist, who is sadly leaving to go to Greenville, South Carolina. And Emily, who is a senior scientist biology, and you went to UNC, right? Which is fun. I went to UNC too. That's great. So what we're going to do here is have about 40 minutes of conversation about how they got their cool jobs, how they made the transition from being a PhD student, postdoc, to moving to industry, and then we're going to have some open networking so that y'all can talk to them about the open position at Affinergy, right? Does everybody know about the open position at Affinergy?
There's two
open positions at Affinergy, even better. So perhaps we can start by, and Aaron, I don't know if you would like to start, maybe just give a brief intro to your background and talk about your job responsibilities.
So, as Molly said, I was immediately before my job at Affinergy, I was a Duke postdoc. I was also an undergrad at Duke in biomedical engineering, went to Rutgers for my PhD, and then to Duke as a postdoc in the non-Versac's lab in biomedical engineering for a little under 3 years, and then joined Affinergy, and I've been there for a little over 2 years now. So I am a scientist on the biology team at Affinergy, so I spend most of my time in the lab doing a lot of the same hands-on techniques that you guys probably do in your labs here. I think Lindsay and Martin will probably talk a little bit more about the different projects that Affinergy works on. So my background is in stem cells, tissue engineering, and biomaterials. So we have a couple of stem cell-based projects, and that's mostly what I work on in the lab.
So I'm Martin Darby, so I'm Director of Research and Development at Affinergy. I think I have a fairly unique perspective on jobs. I got my degrees in the UK a long time ago and worked in Germany for a number of years as a postdoc, and then in Baltimore at Carnegie Institution. And so, my path was very straightforward to undergrad, graduate, postdoc, and then faculty position in Philadelphia. So, so I've taken the academic route. I took that because that's what I was trained to do, and that's what, that's all I knew in some senses. And everyone told me how industry, and certainly back then, even more so than now, it's like the dark side, and you're somehow inferior if you copped out and went to industry and didn't, follow a traditional faculty path. I wasn't all that happy with that in retrospect. At the time, it's what I wanted. So then I worked at NIAHS here for 4 years, sort of as a transition to getting down to North Carolina. I had intended to join a biotech at that time, but the time I chose to move was literally the day before 9/11, and sort of everything sort of changed at that time. So 4 years later, though, through a connection, personal connection, I was put up, I sort of got this opportunity at Affinergy, and I needed the personal connection because at that point, after having been an assistant professor for a number of years, etc., I was getting long in the tooth. So I welcomed the opportunity, took a step backwards and a big pay cut, and but it's probably one of the best things I ever did, and I really enjoy working in sort of in a commercial environment. Affinergy is a small company, so it really isn't like working at a larger company, not that I can really say, having not worked at one, but there's a lot of teamwork. Academia is very much about the individuals, about competition. It's meant to be that way. It's good. It's good for the university. It's good for man's knowledge and understanding. But at a personal level, it can be a little frustrating. So that's my background. So I can certainly tell you the differences between government, commercial, or academia. Obviously, from my description there, you know which I prefer. And with that, we'll get back to what Affinergy does and what Daytoday means after the other two interests.
So I'm Lindsay. I got my PhD from Vanderbilt in cell and developmental biology, and then I came to Duke and I did a 4.5-year postdoc in Michelle Vignal's lab. So I went from xenophis to zebrafish, so still very heavy in developmental biology, but switched to a more translationally relevant topic. So I started studying Crohn's disease and the effects of epigenetics and inflammation. And towards the end of my postdoc, I would say halfway through my postdoc, I realized that I didn't want to be a PI. And I started thinking kind of hard about what it was I wanted to do. I've always been a strong writer. And so when it came time, I wanted to publish my paper. I had a fellowship I was on for my F32. When those winded down, I started looking for writing intensive positions. I was ready to transition away from the bench. So at Affinergy, I don't do any bench work. And I started as a grant writer, which we've kind of rebuilt. So the position that's open is the position that I initially started in, which is, we're calling it a technology development specialist, and we can go in later to what the day-to-day are. And then I've kind of moved up a little bit, so doing a little bit more than just writing and a lot of thinking and reading.
I'm Emily. I'm a scientist at Affinergy, and I was a grad student at Wisconsin in the cell and molecular biology program, and came to UNC for a postdoc in Channing Durr's lab in Lineberger. And so I was interested in industry pretty early on, and I was very basic science as a grad student and wanted to get more into cancer research and drug development and network and meet some people in the area that were in industry already. And so in 2013, actually 2012, I got my first industry position, which was at a medium-sized biotech, Argos Therapeutics, which does immunotherapy. And so I was in the molecular biology group there for 2.5 years, and there they were at the time in a phase 2b HIV trial and a phase 3 renal cell carcinoma trial, and everything there was very focused on those trials, and everyone's role was very specific. And so it's just interesting because my position there was different in the way it feels at Affinergy. There it felt more like my role was very focused. Everyone was doing a specific set of things, and Affinergy is more of an academic feel. So I ended up moving over to Affinergy in 2014 in the molecular biology group, and so yeah, I've been there since, and I am mostly at the bench and planning experiments, and yeah.
Okay, so we have 3 former postdocs here, and I know a lot of postdocs, like, their main question is like, how did you get the job? Did you apply for a job ad? Did you do it through networking? Because sometimes when you're in an academic lab, it just seems like, you read these job ads and they say you must have 2 years of industry experience. So how did you make the leap?
Sure.
I'll start. So I was a postdoc for a little under 3 years. I knew when I started the postdoc that I wanted to end up in industry. That had kind of been the plan for me from pretty early on in grad school. But this job I found through a personal connection. So I think a lot of scientists just really don't like networking in any way, and it's very painful for a lot of people, but do it. And do it before you need a job. But yeah, so that was, and I had sent out job applications to a number of places and just got silence back. So I don't know, the number of, like the percentage of people that find a job through networking and through personal connections, I'm not sure what the percentage is, but it's high. So
Our CEO always says he'd much rather hire somebody that kind of is a friend of a friend and is already kind of vetted, if that makes sense. instead of picking randomly from the internet. But that's not entirely when we have hired people from both ways, right? You didn't?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's kind of rare, but my first job at Argos, I actually did get through just applying. But you never know what connections are happening in the background of that, because later on I found out that my boss knew my postdoc, or knew of my postdoc advisor and was familiar with his work and respected his lab. So that was, you know, an indirect connection I didn't know about. But that was, you know, an application. And then my position at Affinergy was actually kind of interesting, because I think there was a posting for a position and then it was filled, and I had there was a job ad. I think it was maybe an NC Biotech posting, and there was an email listed, like a specific email, and so I thought, oh, I'm just going to email this person and see if this job is still available or if there's any other positions. And it ended up happening that there just happened to be a recent vacancy in the group, and so my timing just worked out really well, because they were like, oh, this person's interested, okay, sure. And so that was, it was really, I guess it's fortunate that there was, you know, a personal email listed that you could contact. That's pretty unusual, but if you can, you know, get in touch with someone directly, you know, that's definitely helpful.
For me, I applied through the website, and as a postdoc, I had done on the side of my postdoc freelance grant writing. So I'd done a stint as a contract SBIR writer for another former Duke postdoc. And when I applied for the job at Affinergy, I sent him an email saying, hey, is it okay if I list you as a reference? And it turns out he had actually worked at Affinergy several years before. And so through that connection, I mean, you guys were already well into the hiring process. When I applied, I kind of saw the posting late in that sense. And so thanks to that connection, I was able to get an interview, because I think, you know, it might have been like, we've already got some people we're considering, and then get my job. So it was definitely helpful. I mean, networking is important. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. If it stresses you out to go to a bigger networking event, you can do one-on-one informational interviews. But it is really important, and you never know down the line when it might come into play.
What do you think, Martin, as somebody who hires
I think
postdocs?
I was trying to calculate that while we were talking. I think it seems to be more, I guess, just more recently that we've had people who are sort of connected to someone else. I'd say it's about 50-50 people who we interviewed through job placement. And I must say, you know, I mean, yes, it was a personal connection for Aaron, but I still interviewed 4 people. I mean, it's not a given. I mean, you still have to have the right qualifications and be better than anyone else who's applying at that time. But it certainly does give me an extra level of confidence that someone who I trust can recommend someone else. It is important, but it's not. I think, you know, you get silence many times from industry positions because they are looking for, you know, if someone's looking for experience in industry already, it's probably because they want you to work on the GLP or GMP sort of procedures. We don't do that. I don't like it when my colleagues say that we're more academic, but there's a, you know, element of truth in that. I mean, we are creative, and we work on a diverse number of different projects that requires the same kind of thinking that you've gained in your PhDs. And I will say the PhD is really important. I actually I was convinced at one point that we were, you know, having to pay so much for postdocs. Either anyone can do what we do, you know, sort of attitude. And I went through a phase where I had 2 research associates who, one might have had a master's, I'm not sure, the other one only had a bachelor's. And I felt that they could do some of the sort of day-to-day routine work that we do. And, you know, it was a mistake. And you shouldn't underestimate the critical thinking skills that you develop in your PhD and the independence. Because what I found is I was just taking more and more of my time to give someone a set of instructions every day, rather than, you know, talk about sort of higher level concepts. I mean, when both Emily and Aaron report to me, and so we talk in fairly general terms about, the goals of the project. Of course, I have an opinion on the way experiments should be done, etc., and that the right controls are in there, and so on and so forth. They just go off and do it, and we meet every day at some level, but we have a formal one-on-one every 2 weeks for an hour, usually. These two like to talk a lot, so it generally does take the whole hour. I have someone else who can do it in 15 minutes. But, so yeah, personal connections, but it does come down. I will admit though, having said that, yes, you need a PhD, I am looking for a particular set of skills usually. When we're at, right now we have an opening for a scientist. I have to consider what we already have, and I don't want to duplicate. Well, I'm always looking for a good all-rounder. I don't want to duplicate any special skills. Protein chemistry, large data analysis. Hint, hint. That's what I'm looking for.
So a lot of job ads also stress the soft skills, like communication, teamwork, Martin, you just said independence. Mm-hmm. And is there a way for our postdocs and graduate students to demonstrate that on their resume without saying, I'm independent and I'm a good team player? Or do you even care about that? Or are you just looking for the scientific jobs?
For the grant writer position, for the technology development position, you can show that by saying, I took the initiative to do these different things. When you're a postdoc, you have a big project in front of you, you've got a lot of work to do. So there's room to do other things, and I think seeing somebody who's managed to build an additional thing while they're a postdoc, whether it be, hey, my boss needed some more grants and I went ahead and wrote one for them, or I took on editing for American Journal Experts because I'm really interested in writing. Those are things that speak loudly on a cover letter, on a resume, and I think attest to some of the soft skills without having to say I'm an excellent communicator. I presented at all these conferences and I got a lot of awards. I mean, those are all other ways of showing instead of just telling.
Yeah, we always phone screen first. I mean, that's another. It's always an important way. You always get a sense of someone's ability to communicate that way. I guess that perhaps is unfair to people who aren't native English speakers. Just be prepared, and so it's always worth doing a little. When someone says, they've sort of perhaps looked at your website and have something a little bit more to add, that sort of is impactful. It shows that the person's sort of thinking about it and thinking beyond the, the sort of cursory glance at the website.
Do you have any questions from the audience at this point? Oh, yeah? Okay, thinking about it. So, what are the things, well, you've already kind of talked about that hiring managers are looking for, but, for example, are you thinking about how many papers do they have, what quality are their papers, do they know certain techniques? Lindsay, I know you look, have they written a grant before?
Right. I mean, and we understand, especially if you're coming straight from grad school, for the position that we're hiring for, a postdoc isn't necessary. Postdoc experience would be nice, but we have interviewed folks in the past who have just recently defended or have a defense date set a month from when we're interviewing them. And we understand that you might not have written a grant. I didn't write a grant as a grad student, but there are other ways that you could demonstrate that you enjoy writing and that you're good at it. We had one candidate share the first chapter of his thesis, which he had written independently. And so, but that being said, if it's, an SBIR grant writing thing that you're going after, then showing that you are familiar with what an SBIR grant is a really strong way to set yourself aside, even if it's just, I helped assist in the preparation of some grant, or, again, we're not looking for the fact that you've put a grant out and been successfully, awarded it, but that next step is what sets you apart from everyone else who's written a manuscript or written a book chapter. What about for you looking at publications?
Well, for me, yes, it's very important. Definitely look to see that there are first author publications, and what journal it's published in. I mean, I guess I don't know how impact factors works. I don't look up the impact factor of a journal, but I like it to be something I got a rough idea that it's published in maybe the United States or something, rather than an obscure publication. So yeah, it is very important. The number actually is not that important to me. I'm not, I mean, I know from my own experience, looking back on it, I could certainly think of ways to parcel out the papers that I did publish into multiple units. And, I guess sometimes you see you have too many, I don't know, there's only so much a person can really do independently. So just, a couple of good papers would be very impactful to me if they're first author. But for the side, I'm not sure that that's so necessary for the sort of technology development sort of position.
Number of papers doesn't concern me, but hearing that somebody wrote the first draft by themselves, again, it depends on your experience in grad school and how much opportunity you've been given, but there are definitely labs you can be a part of where the PI takes on the kind of lion's share of the writing, and that would be concerning to me. I want to see that they wrote the first couple drafts, with getting oversight from their PI. I'm not expecting you to have put it out in a vacuum, but I do, those are the kind of things I'm looking for. Did you write it by yourself? Did you write a review by yourself? Those are things that often you have more liberty with. And shows kind of how you work as a writer, putting concepts together. But number, I'm unconcerned by number when I look at that. I would be concerned maybe by 0, unless you are just finishing grad school and your papers, in the review process. That I understand. But,
we don't really have anything else to measure,
right.
sort of the output. But I mean, I know how it can be difficult to get papers out in one lab, and it's interesting. I never even thought about the PI writing the paper, because the people I worked for, it was my job to write the first draft in completely, and then it would be edited. But I suppose, there's no way for us to know who wrote what. I do want to correct one thing that we're sort of talking about, since there is a position open, and we keep talking about writing, that's not all that the position's about. I really would do it a disservice, and a disservice to what you do. We didn't sort of go into what Affinergy does, but we use some, people like to point out, old-fashioned techniques of phage display, approaches for screening large peptide libraries to find functional peptides. And so, we have a few things which are very close to becoming products, but we support ourselves very much through small business grants. And so the technology position is technology development. We're just always looking for new ideas, just to keep going, to make the next greatest product.
Well, part of the reason that we changed the name from grant writer to technology development is the balance of thinking to writing. Yes, you do writing in this position, but the majority of your time is spent thinking and dreaming up kind of creative extensions of our technology platform.
I mean, for example, if you really love science, except for picking up a pipette, but you like everything else about it, thinking about experiments and interpreting data, talking to people about, about ideas, and then putting them down on paper in a convincing manner so it will succeed in peer review. Well, that's the job for you. It's really, that's why we look for people with publications, people with some postdoctoral experience, often an experience that no one else has. So we might go down a new avenue because the people who write the grants inevitably bring their own experience to bear on the topics they choose. Question?
Well, I did notice that, like, the job posting you're talking about, it was like science writer / technology development, and then it's now just technology development. So I didn't know, okay, so there's a fair amount of writing, but can you elaborate on the technology development part?
Yeah, so there's 3 grant cycles per year, so January 5th, April 5th, and September 5th. And we put a fair number of grants out per cycle in order to keep our R&D pipeline alive. The bar for getting an SBIR grant is lower than an academic grant, but you don't get 100% of them by any stretch. And so each grant cycle, after the last one ends, the first thing that I start doing is exploring the literature for unmet needs and how can Affinergy's platform of phage display or synthesizing peptides, how can that meet some of these unmet needs? How can we turn that into an in vitro diagnostic? How can we turn it into some sort of therapeutic? And so for the first month to 2 months, depending on the length of the cycle, the cycles are, there's a 3-month, a 4-month, and a 5-month cycle. I spend time, I kind of say dreaming, I go into the literature, I pursue the things that I'm interested in or topics I've heard about in the news or areas, the way I kind of come up with unmet needs varies each cycle, but there's people who will say, hey, have you thought about this? And then I'll go kind of chase that down. And so the first part is spent building an argument, not in paper, just in, kind of in my brain of whether or not, is this feasible? Is this really an unmet need? Is this something Affinergy could really help with their scientific platform? And so I kind of have to build up an argument to see, is it even worth writing about? Not every time, it doesn't mean that every time I pick winners, and sometimes I pick topics that I ultimately hate in the end, where I kind of decide I don't love it as much as I thought I did, but that's what helps you write a compelling grant, a compelling story, is making sure all of those pieces are in place, and that really is all just reading and thinking, it's not writing. And then once we get closer to the grant deadline and we have our topics set, that's when the writing starts in earnest. But I really only spend a couple weeks in the thick of writing everything out versus, and I love that I just mimicked a pen. I use a computer. But for the most part, it's like I said, a lot more thinking than writing. Yeah.
How important is the understanding for a protein, because you guys are doing a lot of protein work? For example, I do a lot of prostate cancer work. Just wondering, in that sense, are you guys open to accepting for the grant writing position, the development position, someone with other skill sets?
Yeah, we've taken people from very diverse backgrounds across science. I mean, I'm a cell and developmental biologist. I have no biochemistry experience whatsoever. A lot of the phage display stuff, I've learned that as I've been embedded at Affinergy. We assume that if you've been through your PhD and maybe done some postdoc work that you'll be able to pick it up. We are more interested in people coming from diverse backgrounds because we need fresh perspectives, right? If we hire all cell and developmental biologists and we all come up with the same ideas because we're all interested in the same topics, that's not useful. It's better to have, diverse backgrounds, I think. That's, as long as you, can learn, which I think if you've made it through your PhD, hopefully, you can, then it's not a concern.
Next question for Aaron. Can you elaborate on the biochemistry and molecular biology scientist position? What kind of day-to-day responsibilities do you have?
So, as Lindsay kind of alluded to, we have a lot of different projects going on simultaneously, and each scientist, how many are we? 6? I think?
On biology.
In biology. So there's 6 of us. So each of us kind of has something that we ourselves are responsible for, but most things are at least pairs of people in terms of the projects themselves, and the specific projects kind of get shuffled around depending on where we are in the grant cycle, to be honest. So right leading up to a grant deadline, we tend to focus on gathering data for new grants that are going in, or for phase 2 grants going in where we've already had the phase 1. But in terms of, do you mean in terms of what techniques we use in the lab, things like that? It's for the most, aside from, so I had no phage display experience. barely knew what it was when I applied for the job. But I do a lot of cell culture, Western blots, ELISAs, imaging. I learned how to do peptide conjugations to various materials, which I did not know before I started there. And so, and as Martin also kind of said, we are pretty independent in terms of how we go about approaching different problems. So we know we need to figure out how to show this or that, and then we kind of go about, and so we do most of our own experiment design, then we run it by Martin or talk to other people about it to kind of tweak it. But so it is a mix of coming up with what experiments we're going to do and then the hands-on stuff. In terms of the basic techniques that you would need to know, chances are, I have no idea what your background is, but it's a lot of the hands-on work that we do is pretty similar to what you might do in an academic lab.
Yeah, several of the techniques that you mentioned.
And for you?
I do a lot of phage display and ELISAs, and I've done many ELISAs before coming to Affinergy, but I had never done phage display before, but I've done a lot of the parts of the process, and I understood the concepts, and so it wasn't hard to learn it, and we have some really good experts in phage display in the at the company, and so yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the basic skills that I had learned in grad school and postdoc, I use those, and we're doing similar things in the lab at Affinergy too.
It sounds like there's a lot of on-the-job learning. What particular skills are you guys looking for that people will come with?
For the scientist sort of level?
And I guess also the writer level as well.
Well, I think as far as the scientist goes, I mean, certainly I need someone who knows basic sort of molecular biology, knows how to grow bacteria and transform them, etc. The usual plasmid. I mean, that's sort of a given. Sort of that. I mean, the basic skill sets. You've got your basics of molecular biology, and then. Same for cell culture. Ideally, I'd like someone who can also, though wouldn't have to teach the basics of growing eukaryotic cells. Now, in the past, I've definitely been looking for people with, say, flow cytometry skills, but right now I've got a surfeit of flow cytometry skills that sort of exceed the capabilities of our machine. Right now, we are doing some brand new project looking at basically immune profiling through phage display, looking at the composition of an immune repertoire between different diseases, okay? And so that requires a whole bunch of next generation sequencing knowledge, and we're able to get through this ourselves. I mean, Google is your friend or whatever, cutting and pasting little bits of R, which you forget the next day. But anyway, someone who had a little more in-depth understanding of handling big data, right now, for example, if someone had RNA-seq sort of experience, but I mean more than just sending your RNA prep to the core facility. I'm talking about actually knowing what's going on and being able to analyze it. I guess the other thing I felt we needed a little more strength in was, and now we're covering everything, so protein biochemistry. Someone who knows how to determine an equilibrium constant. But something as simple as that, so just like basics, because I can't expect, unless I need an absolute skill. So, right now, if somebody told me, oh yeah, I've done lots of sort of RNA-seq data, and I know how to handle the output from that. But otherwise, it's just all-round basic skills. When I read your, let's say you've got a great CV and you've got those 2 first author papers, And, it'll probably be a topic I know nothing about. So to be honest, I probably don't look a whole lot further than being a decent journal and your first author, and I don't know what the initials of your particular protein or gene are that you're looking at. That's being brutally honest about, how much time you have to spend looking through the CV.
For the writer position, I'm less concerned with how much of that you've done, or just that you have an understanding of basic cell biology, basic biochemistry, because obviously in order to write about it, you need to understand how we do it. But yeah, less concerned with being as well-rounded, I would say. Sorry, you had another question.
Yeah, no, I was also just wondering in terms of soft skills, like what would make someone a good team member for you? Do you find that you have certain qualities that all of you share, or is that something that's less important?
Not being an asshole.
That seems like a good
Are we being
one.
recorded?
No. No, we're not.
That's why she wanted to
Yeah.
tell me.
How she looked at when she said that.
Yeah, I mean,
How do you judge that? I don't know. I mean, it sort of tends to, if someone can't contain themselves during the interview, that's a red flag right there. I think, I have various questions I ask about what do you think makes a good, what's important, and most important in being a good team member. I'll listen to that answer. I'm not gonna, there's certain words I'm listening out for.
also maybe demonstrated, like if you have a lot of collaborations, that tells me you can get along with a lot of people. If you worked on multiple projects in your lab, helping your lab mates along, that's another great sign that you've been pushing things forward as a team rather than as an individual.
No, but sometimes, I do sort of daydream sometimes whether I need someone to like shake things up in a cozy world. We all get along extremely well.
We all eat lunch together every day.
I think I have very low turnover. I mean, Aaron's not leaving because I wish he wasn't.
Yeah, we're all
but I guess his wife's taking that.
Yeah, I'm leaving for a family situation where my wife got a great job out of state. Not because I wanted to leave Affinergy or because I found another job in this area. Yeah, I don't think so. It was zero scientists.
We don't get the turnover. I do get are people who are frustrated. I guess, and this is something else that people ask at these sessions usually. What are the opportunities for personal advancement within the company? You have to remember, when you've got a company which is only 20 people to begin with, 1, 2, 3, like 5 of those are manager level anyway, not actually working at the bench. Then there's not a lot of room. We have a small gradation between scientist and senior scientist. Certainly, Aaron would become senior scientist if he were not leaving. But Emily, I think you came in as senior scientist because you already had 2.5 years in industry, and at the time I was not in charge of all of research and development at that time. And the person who was really believed that it was important to have someone who was who knew how to work in a company environment. I don't hold to that quite as much as that person did. So there's that, and then a couple of people have left who've been really good and needed perhaps more stability. Sort of basically gone to bigger companies, because unless I leave, then there's not really much for them, nowhere for them to go. We can change salaries, of course, and we can make up titles. We can have, we can principal scientists or something. I don't know. That's a thing. It doesn't mean anything. Honestly, unless you might know, I'm not VP research and development. I'm not an officer of the company. No desire to be, so I don't want to be legally responsible for Affinergy. But I could be, what should I be? Chief of something?
Yeah,
so that is one frustration that people have, is that we're always, of course, we work there because I work there still because I believe that we can get a good product out of what we do. Though we're pushing at many different things right now. As soon as one gets to more of a development phase, we will need different people probably. And you know, my CEO assures me you can get external funding for anything that we can. You know, I need to show him that we have a product concept with that works every time, has a great market and good profits. So as soon as he can believe in those things, and sometimes unfortunately stuff gets mismatched. You know, we see a clear unmet need. You know, sort of one of the things that Lindsay has developed, I guess, is sort of this aiding the sort of diagnosis of preeclampsia. It's a huge potential market, and we have some good ideas. We just, you know, so he's ready to go with that, but we, you know, frustratingly haven't really got our technology working in that particular area. Now there are some other therapeutic drug monitoring things that we're doing which are really on the cusp of being, you know, putting a widget out there, but for which the markets are not as great. So eventually these things will come together, I hope. That's why I stay there. I enjoy it.
But it's a bit nebulous, so you kind of have to stay knowing that hopefully we will get something, and then some other avenues are going to open up.
I'd say it must be a good work environment because people don't, despite the fear of, you know, of everything falling apart. It hasn't fallen apart. I had that fear since 2006 when I joined. I was worried about the next 2 weeks all the time, but somehow just kept it going.
It is a good work environment. That's why that's one of the reasons why the turnover is so low. Is that as far as I know, pretty much everyone likes working there.
A year and a half ago, we had a grant writer leave shy of a large deadline in September, you know, just weeks before, and I was left with 10 grants. But these two stepped in and ensured that I didn't have to do all 10 by myself, and we got all 10 out, and it was actually a really good cycle. But that's the kind of environment it is. Like, people don't let things drop. Everybody helps everybody else out. It's,
yeah, I guess the wearing multiple hats thing kind of comes in at Affinergy because it is small, and so yes, we're at the bench, but when there is a grant deadline and, you know, and we need some more people writing and editing, then we have those skills and we can help, and we're willing to do it, and we all, you know, enjoy working together. So
yeah, I think that's one thing. If you're the kind of person, I would say, who's creative, if you don't like to kind of be pigeonholed into a particular topic, it's a great place to work. I mean, in the tech development position, I read about so many different things, and it's very creative. It scratches an itch I didn't know I had, if that makes sense. You know, when I was a postdoc, I was very happy working on the project I was working on, but I really like to learn about new things, and this allows you to do that. And I think even in the lab, working on, you know, a diverse array of projects gives you that same kind of feeling.
Before we move to open networking, I'm going to ask the question that everyone wants to know. What's the pay like for a beginner? And to put it in perspective, the postdoc salary right now is $4,700, $4,800, going up 2% next year. Did everybody know that? So we'll get to 48.
Well, it's more than that.
It's more than that, but it's not as much as you might think.
Yeah, I'm not sure what yeah.
At a small company.
That's right. I mean, don't forget we have a fairly limited budget. So if you think you're going to be making over 100,000 straight out of a postdoc, that's not going to happen.
And I think that I just want to say that I think that's actually very rare in general.
I think so.
I think it would be important to have some talk to your friends, talk to people who have gone in. But out of all of my friends who went into industry, I know of one who started near 100,000 at a big pharmaceutical company. Most people do not start there. Just know that if it's a good fit, your salary, you can increase your salary, but sometimes I think it's just more important to get your foot in the door and start working and then worry about moving up. It will be more than you make as a postdoc, but it's not going to be $100,000. And we've had people turn us down in the past, and and I think ultimately realized that just for pay, that their expectations were unrealistic. It is the question I ask in interviews, what do you anticipate making? Because if we're too far apart, then the interview's over.
I think, I mean, Emily, you can clarify this. I mean, it depends on where you're coming from. So if you're, you know, as Lindsay just said, you know, you need to get a foot in the door and prove yourself, because very often that was the, I mean, I alluded to taking a pay cut when I started, and I realized I just needed to be realistic and take the opportunity. If I wanted to get into biotech, you know, you've got to take the opportunity and get in there, because it counts for something once you know, got that on your resume. So for someone coming from academia, well, we don't know, you know, there are a lot of you as well. I mean, you know, after, you know, being blunt again, you know, this area of the country, I believe, is something like probably one of the highest percentages of PhDs and MDs in the nation. So there are a lot of people out there, but there are also a lot of biotech companies and universities competing for that talent pool. But Emily came from another company, and I believe we matched your salary at least, or did we not? I don't know.
Yes.
You don't have to say numbers.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it was a slight bump up from my last position. But,
Okay.
yeah. Which is how you really.
Yeah. So no, but that's necessary. She's already proven herself that, you know, you know, good references and everything else, and I think. Could you contrast for them, like, the difference between working at Argos and working at Affinergy?
Without using the word more, words more.
Without using the word more academic. Variety in your answer.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, things have really changed at Argos now, because they had some trials that, like, did not work well. So when I was there, yeah, I guess, like I said, you know, we had a QC group, quality control, quality assurance, document control, and then we were still basic research, but all of our experiments were focused on, okay, they're in the manufacturing group where they're making this immunotherapy product, they're having this problem, and so it was a product where they were using patient RNA to then develop a vaccine to give to the patient to fight their own version of whatever, you know, cancer or the HIV, in that case HIV. And so, you know, if they were having trouble in the manufacturing group with some technical aspect, then we would go and troubleshoot that in the lab. So it wasn't like we were looking for new ideas. We weren't starting from scratch on anything. It was very focused on specific problems. And so, yeah, that's, you know, that, and everyone, you know, was focused on those trials, and, you know, just much more like, you know, of a, I guess, they're just farther along. They're in the clinical trial stage. And then, you know, at Affinergy, I guess it's to me, it does feel like a little bit more resemblant of how it was as a postdoc or a grad student, because you're kind of thinking about a project, and usually it's sort of at the early stages of development, and so you're, you know, trying different things and troubleshooting, and you're, you know, like we said, that usually there's a couple people on a project, and that, you know, if it's maybe a little farther along, maybe there's 2 people working on it, but a lot of times it's one person on an idea, and that's kind of more like how it is, you know, in an academic lab. And it's fun because, yeah, you're, you know, you get the positive aspect of, okay, we're trying to develop a product to help, you know, people and to improve healthcare, and, you know, either if it's a diagnostic or whatever, like implant or whatever, you know, it is. We're working towards that goal, which is a good feeling, and we feel like we're closer to that. You know, you're not working on one protein, and this protein might be used. You know, and that is kind of important to me, to feel like my work is close to helping people. I think a lot of people, feel that way and would like their work to feel like it was getting close to improving healthcare or helping patients. But yet it's still got the energy and the excitement of being like new ideas, and it's the early stage, so it's fresh. And there's some frustrating things about that, because a lot of times things don't work very well when you're just getting started, and there's a lot of troubleshooting that goes along with it. But it can be fun, and thinking about things that nobody's tried before, and finding some peptide that binds to something that nobody's found before. It's all new, so that's exciting, and definitely different from the kind of work that I had done at Argos, which was at a different stage, a very different kind of biotech company. So I like this environment, this situation. I prefer this over the previous. So I'm happy with how things are there.
All right, so shall we move to open networking? Everybody can get another cup of coffee and a pastry and ask your individual questions.
I want to just mention one thing that we haven't touched on, which is different to sort of transitioning between academic jobs, is that usually when we advertise, we need someone. We can't wait 6 months, we can't wait 3 months. In fact, I don't like waiting more than 2 weeks, but we like to get the interview process done, and then I think you need to understand that companies work on a different sort of set of deadlines. You need to be prepared to go. If that's what you think you want, be ready to take it on if you're successful in the interview.
Yeah, it's not like academia where somebody's saying, well, I think I'm getting this grant in the next couple months, and so I'm going to have the budget, but this is much more, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I need someone to replace. Your last day is June 22nd, so I would like to have someone the following Monday, to be honest.
And the technology
or overlap
position's
even,
already
but,
open.
Yeah, so.
And let me point out the postdoc policy says that postdocs should give a month's notice. It does not say must give a month's notice. Should. On the other hand, PIs must give you 3 months' notice. All right, so just happy to discuss that further. If anyone who needs advice on that. All right, thank you.